Hey everyone, today I'm going to go over how I built this mini cutting board holder and these mini cutting boards. I do all the cooking in my house, and I thought it would be really cool if I had smaller cutting boards because I hate pulling out one of those large ones every time I just want to cut a tomato or a cucumber or even just a chicken breast. This was a lot of fun to build, especially since I didn't even realize I was building it until halfway through the project. See, I had a whole bunch of extra spare pieces from all the charcuterie boards that I did. So I thought I would build this and have a lot of fun as I did it. I hope you enjoy this video. This is how I built it. These were all these scrap pieces that I had from all those charcuterie projects that I just posted. I wasn't sure about how I was going to make those previous projects, and some of them didn't fit into the mold, so I had to kind of cut slivers off the middle. If you saw the last project, you know what I'm talking about. But I didn't want to throw all this stuff away, because it's actually extremely good wood. It's great to build with, it's very strong, it's easy to build with, so throwing it away would have been a huge shame. But it's kind of hard to use when they're just kind of thin slivers like this. A lot of guys kind of use them for trim, but I didn't quite have enough to build anything that I was going to use this for trim for. So I kind of played around with it and decided, before I decided on what I was going to build, I kind of needed to make this useful to begin with. So I ran these through my table saw and kind of straightened them all up. Not one piece was more than an inch thick, but a few of them were a little wider. However, the width of them were kind of varying. So I thought, if I was going to use this for anything, I was going to have to clean them all up and make this into a usable piece of wood. So I cleaned them all up. I took the pieces that were going to be nice and long and made that into one board. But some of the pieces were much too long. So I kind of cut off the excessively long pieces, and then I took those end cut pieces and put them all together in kind of one block piece. That actually worked out really great in the end. So I decided to go ahead, glue these up, and put them in the clamps so I could make kind of one massive piece of wood and then kind of one long block piece of wood. It was really good because I had enough clamps to kind of do that. And the other pieces, I kind of glued them up. But before that, I kind of wanted to shape them up and try and make them fit in as easy as possible and kind of make them look as good as possible too. Once I was happy with that pattern, I glued them all up and then threw them into my clamps. Funny thing was, this smaller piece required my 4-foot clamps because I didn't have anything that could fit those in. But I got them in there, balanced it all out, and glued them all up. In the end, it turned into a really good, solid piece of wood. Now that that was all dried up, I was able to take them out of the clamps. And just like most of us have with gluing up problems, you're kind of left with a solid piece of wood, but really kind of, very, very rough, even more rough than anything you kind of buy because it's a whole bunch of mismatched pieces put together. So once I realized that I was happy with this final piece, I needed to straighten them all up. So I squared it up first by cutting off one piece with my table slider. I tried to cut off as little as I possibly could to get them all straightened up. That way I'd have as big of a piece as possible to work with. You see, at this point I still had no idea what I was building. I just knew I needed something usable that I could build with. So I cut these up and got two nice square straight pieces. As you can tell, the top and the bottom are still pretty rough, so it was time to take it over to my planer and clean it up. I slowly ran them through. Black walnut is pretty nice to work with, and it was easy to plane up. I absolutely love taking wood through my planer. Someone with OCD, it's such a great feeling to see it come out all nice and clean like that. So once I cleaned up the other side, it was time to take the longer piece through too. These pieces were generally very similar to begin with, so it didn't take quite as much to get them all into one uniform piece as it did with the smaller piece that I had. However, it did take a few passes to get through, and then once I did, it was all just simple woodworking from there. Again, it was so satisfying to watch us come through the planer each time. Once I did that, it was time to clean up the edges. The longer pieces I had previously kind of cleaned up, but this shorter piece really needs to be squared up a little bit more. However, in the end, it did come out pretty nice and clean, so there wasn't too much I had to cut off, just like this longer piece. I'd kind of already matched them up to begin with, so it was really just a matter of cutting off those last little slivers to get myself a nice square piece. And as I kind of thought it over in my head as I was doing this, I still really had no idea what I was about to make. I just knew it was going to be a lot easier if I had very nice, very clean pieces to work with. And this came out nice. It was flat, it was clean, it was square. So the only thing left now to do was kind of figure out what I was going to do with it. So I took a few measurements to see if maybe I could make like a table or a shelf or something. Kind of had a bit of a dance party while I was doing it. Still had no idea until it suddenly hit me. You see, I didn't really need any kind of tiny shelf or kind of tiny table like this. So I decided right there and then, I figured it out, cutting boards. And that's when I started putting it all together. I thought I could take that block piece, cut them down into two perfectly even square pieces for the two pieces that I was going to have. I thought at first I was going to make two cutting boards with the holder so I could kind of use one for chicken, one for vegetables. But in the end, as you'll see in a bit, I actually ended up with a third piece I was going to come to put together. I kind of set up a stop block because I needed to make a couple of even pieces for the top and the bottom. Even though I knew I was making this kind of cutting board with this cutting board holder, I was still kind of putting it together as I went. And I really wish I had stopped for a little bit and put together a plan, because this part kind of took a little bit longer than it should have. I deliberated a little bit here and there, and it really slowed down the process. I think it's one of the reasons why so many of us always go with the saying, measure twice and cut once, because you end up with a lot less waste. But I was thinking, you know what, I'll kind of just have some fun and keep it going as I was going. Going through, I really kind of started together to put this plan in place. And it was fun. It was really fun as I was going through. But again, it would have been a lot nicer if I was able to kind of just plan it out first. For instance, I would have mitered these pieces instead of just kind of nailing them in all straightwise. It would have been a lot pleasing to the eye. The strength would have been the same, but you'll see in a second why I kind of should have done that to begin with. Putting these pieces all together, since they were all over the board and just one bunch of small pieces put together, the end result was the face. You could kind of tell it was a bunch of pieces put together. So I had to take a little bit of time, take some of the scraps that were left, and kind of put this face plate on top with these mitered corners. The funny thing is, in the end, it actually kind of came out with this really cool look with this mitered faceplate, but these straightaway edges on top. I might actually try making something like this on more of a massive scale in the future, but as of right now, it worked out in the end. Thank God it did, because if it didn't, I wasn't sure what I was going to do, but it was actually a really cool look after all was said and done. I was really happy with that. Once I got that all done, since I was just nailing it in, I needed to kind of fill in all those nail holes. So I took a lot of the sawdust that I had from the black walnut and just kind of made a slurry with my wood glue. It's an old trick. A lot of us use it. It works out really well. You can kind of like paste it in with your knife, or a lot of us just kind of just shove it in the holes with our finger there. It works really good. It very blends in. Once the glue dries, you can't see the color of the glue, and then you just kind of have the sawdust. I still had one of these pieces left over, so I decided to kind of make a base to give the holder a little bit more of a 3D look. It was kind of coming out a little boring in my opinion, so I was glad I had one of these extra pieces still that I could build this base. it lifted it off the counter a little bit and it gave it a bit more of a cooler look. Again, I kind of just nailed it all together, but since it was going on the bottom of the piece, it didn't need to be, I didn't need any of the nailing holes filled in or anything like that. So this came out really nice. And then I kind of just arbitrarily put it on the bottom in the middle somewhere. It didn't really need to be measured in perfectly or anything. It wasn't hard to kind of find the center. And since it was going on the bottom, you couldn't even really see it unless you looked down. The next thing I had to kind of figure out was, as I was putting the pieces in, they were just kind of falling right through the back. So one of these last little pieces I had, I kind of cut it and put a slot in the back. I didn't have anything that could fill the entire back, and I thought after, it's actually kind of a good sign, because if I were to put these away when they were a little damp, this way it'd have a lot of air movement through. So that actually worked out really well. And this was all that was left from all those scrap pieces. Now I kind of needed to sand it down. I started off with a 60 grit to kind of sand down where all the holes were and all the scuff marks were and everything. And if you use kind of that glue slurry with the sawdust, you end up it doesn't look great at first, but once you do sand it down, it looks amazing. So started off with the 60 grit, which would get me down to where I needed. And once I was done with that, kind of swapped it over to 150 grit, which was going to be the final sanding destination for these guys. I didn't really need to go any higher than that since it would constantly be cut up. The cutting board itself kind of has my salt shakers on it and a few other things on top of it. So having it an absolutely smooth to the touch was kind of pointless since it was going to be cut up and it's kind of chopped into pieces after all was said and done. You know how cutting boards go. Black walnut, however, is extremely durable, so it was kind of nice to use this for this because I knew I was going to get a lot of longevity out of this nice little thing. Once I kind of had them sanded down, I needed to put a finish on it, but when you finish it, it's nice to have those softer edges, so just take a few extra seconds, kind of sand off those edges. You don't really need a router. Your hand sander is gonna make it nice and soft, good enough. One thing I was absolutely ecstatic about was how the finish made it look. I didn't think it was going to make that much of a difference being such a small item, but man was I wrong, because after I was putting the finish on, I was blown away what a nice little, countertop thing I was building here. I didn't think it was going to come out looking this cool. I was building it more for something that I could use and I could beat up, but the end result was something I was super happy about. I was shocked at how nice the finish kind of made this all put together, and it was really handy. But the finish just did its job. This is this little homemade finish that I make. I've got a video up on it. I'll link it in my description if you want to make it. It's completely food safe. It's a lot cheaper than most finishes are to use as well. And as you can tell, the end result was amazing. I was so happy. For something that was made out of just a bunch of scrap pieces, I didn't spend $1 on making this whole thing. Again, not one piece was bigger than 1 inch thick. This was a lot of fun. I literally built this in a day. I didn't even realize I was building it until halfway through. This is really fun. The end result was amazing. It's extremely sturdy, looks really cool. I'm super happy with it. If you guys like this and like some of my other projects, I really hope you kind of, subscribe to my channel. It's amazing how positive you guys have been. If you have any questions, something I didn't maybe describe in this, please feel free to comment. I always try to answer as many of the comments as I get. Thanks again for watching, guys, and I hope I see you soon.